So we will be recording this tonight to share on Zoom. So you may have got a note, or Zoom on YouTube. So you may have gotten a notification about that. I'm going to do a brief introduction and then I'm going to turn it over to Jeanette and Linda for the rest of our time today. So my name is Ashley D'Antonio. I am one of the 500 Women Scientists Corvallis Pod members, and I help to organize the TAP Talks. So this evening, we are going to have a TAP Talk focused on food waste and composting. And these TAP Talks are presented by 500 Women Scientists, as well as Block 15 here in Corvallis. We're obviously not at Block 15 right now. We've been working on this through Zoom for the past few months. Hopefully we'll be able to see you all at Block 15 sometime soon in the future. And these TAP Talks are a way that 500 Women Scientists helps to amplify the voices of women and women scientists in our Corvallis community as part of the 500 Women Scientists mission of making science more accessible and more inclusive. So tonight, while the presentation is going on, I'm going to ask you to keep yourself muted and to keep your cameras off so that we can make sure we have enough bandwidth for the presenter. So during the presentation, please mute yourself, please turn your cameras off. When we come back at the end for Q&A, love to see your faces. We can turn our cameras on at that point in time. If you have any other questions about Zoom logistics, you can message me in the chat. I'd be happy to help. So with that, I'm going to introduce our two speakers. I'll introduce them both at the same time, and then we'll start our talk. So Jeanette Hardison is a longtime Corvallis resident and a waste prevention professional of nearly 30 years. She has served as education chair for the Association of Oregon Recyclers and received their statewide Individual Recycler of the Year award. Presently, Jeanette is co-leader of the Waste Prevention Action Team of the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition, creating the popular Corvallis Area Reuse Directory. She founded and directs the coalition's No Food Left Behind campaign, which we'll hear a bit about tonight, helping our community prevent wasted food in our home. So Jeanette will be starting us off, and then we'll turn it over to Linda towards the end. She'll take over the second half. Linda has been gardening organically since 1980 here in the Willamette Valley, a lifetime member of Oregon Tilth, former board member of 10 Rivers Food Web, and a volunteer and organizer of the annual soil amendment sale for 10 years. From 2009 to 2012, she revitalized and reorganized the HP Employee Organic Garden and was a lead for HP Corvallis Sustainability Network. She loves growing food, and urban gardening includes doing compost in small spaces, which I'm really excited to hear about because I have a very small space for composting. So with that, Jeanette, I think you can share your screen and I'll just turn it over to you all for the rest of the time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the screen share thing.
Oh, we will have time at the end for Q&A. I did want to mention that real quick. So if you want to have questions at the end, but if you have questions throughout and you really want to put it in the chat, we can put them in there and I can make a note of what they are or pause, and we can address some of your questions. So we will definitely have time for questions.
Great. All right, thank you, Ashley. So I'd actually like to start with some gratitude. First to the 500 Women Scientists for asking me to present again with some new tips and tricks. To the EPA Region 10 for providing the Food Too Good to Waste framework that campaigns like ours are based on. To Oregon Department of Environmental Quality for DEQ's grant funding that enabled us to create this project and keep it going straight through the pandemic. And deep gratitude to the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition for its steadfast support and matching funds that make sure we get to continue this work of saving money and living more sustainably by wasting less food. My gratitude to all of you for being here as well. And I encourage you, as Ashley said, to share your questions in the chat as we go. And if there's something that's timely and needs to be asked as we go, that's fine. We can address this. So the title of our talk here today is Wasted Food versus Food Waste. What's the difference? Well, it's a straightforward concept. When we say food waste, we generally are talking about all organic matter from a kitchen, edible or not. From the overripe banana to the banana peel, from the half-eaten chicken stir fry to the bones. At No Food Left Behind, when we say wasted food, we're focused on the edible food that you bought or grew that coulda, shoulda, woulda been eaten if. And then there's usually a behavior that we had that, or didn't have, right, that let the food go bad. And so my intention is to help us willingly confess those behaviors and give you easy tools to avoid them, cutting your food costs and your carbon footprint. And as Ashley said, we also have a presenter who's an avid composter and gardener. And she'll be talking about different ways to deal with food waste because composting is great for that. And we should also compost, not trash, the wasted food if it's not sent to the dog or the chickens. But first, we'll discuss why preventing it is far better. Now, we know that you care about this issue, so we're sharing our experiences for how to fix it. And just a brief review, because most have already heard why this is important. As a nation, we're overbuying, overcooking, over-serving, and improperly storing our foods, wasting a ton of time and a ton of money on food we'll never eat. But it doesn't have to be that way. There's indisputable evidence that has shown that reducing wasted food ranks third out of the top 100 existing ways to reverse global climate change. And when combined with the fourth best way, eating a plant-rich diet, being mindful with food moves it to the top way to change our carbon footprints, which look about like this. See, the lower we eat on the food chain, the better. And in many cases, it's much less expensive. Now, I think it's important to start with some myth busting. So often when No Food Left Behind staff are tabling at a farmer's market, someone will say that, oh, the grocery stores and restaurants, they're the biggest contributors and they need to be working harder. Well, all of us can be doing more, but it is a myth that they waste the most. In fact, the largest percentage of wasted food in the US occurs once we've brought it home. It's true. Myth number 2 is that it's hard to change those habits. The truth is, once you have the right tools to prevent the food waste and the wasted food, it's a time and money saver, and it can even be fun. First, though, let's imagine that it's dinner time. You're sitting at a table or wherever you eat, and there's a plate of freshly prepared food sitting in front of you. Now, someone grew it. If not you, then someone else processed, transported, and packaged those ingredients. You or someone else bought and stored those ingredients, and someone prepared them into this meal. What's missing from a lot of people's consciousness is just the fact that the natural resources consumed to get your food from farm to fork or spoon is now actually embedded in that food, even if it came from your garden or farm. So it really helps to think about food that way. So now imagine you're sitting in front of that meal and someone walks over and scrapes off a fourth of it right into the trash of the compost pail. Well, we'd be horrified if someone did that to our meal, right? But that's essentially what's happening in the US with our food, in that the average American family of 4 is throwing out the equivalent of 1 out of every 4 bags of groceries. It's like walking out of the store, putting 3 bags on your bike or in your trunk, and you throw the other one out. You know, life gets busy. Sometimes we eat out more often, and then the food gets lost in the back, the leftovers, or we skip meals, and food goes bad before we can eat it. But we need to treat our food like the investment that it is. With that much money spent a year on food that's never eaten, you can see how there's definitely room for improvement. And it's, like I said, it's kind of fun. So wasted food is wasted money. If you think about it that way, and then you come over to our website, we have a lot of ways that can help you change your habits. And, you know, it's easier to do if we change our mindsets, thinking of food as something valuable. So when we care about something, we want to protect it. We can do this every day with every meal. The No Food Left Behind campaign makes it easy to help you learn how to waste less food at home. So check it out on our website. We offer downloadable smart strategies in English and Spanish. The A to Z fruit and veggie storage guide for proper storage of produce. Meal planners and smart shopping lists to prevent overbuying and impulse shopping. Again, these are some of the bad behaviors that we end up, it happens. We have a prep now, eat later document for preventing stuff, for when you get home from the store, and it makes your prep faster. Freezer inventory to prevent stuff from getting buried in there and freezer burned. Eat first finds so that you know what has to go soonest. And a list of local recipes for leftovers and apps. And we'll talk about most of these tonight, but you can also go to the website and explore them in both languages. Now, do we have any questions or comments from the audience before we get any further? All right, just chime in when you need to. So, one clever mantra that helps our mindset change is with a clever jingle that we tell 4th and 5th grade students when we bring our eco-edutainment to their classrooms and we teach them about wasting less food. It goes, take what you can eat and then eat what you take. Take what you can eat and then eat what you take, right? It's catchy. It's also catchy for adults. You could sub in, buy what you can eat and then eat what you buy. It's a good mantra while you're shopping. Just because something's a great price doesn't mean we should buy a bunch of them if they're just gonna go bad. before we can eat them. In that case, that great price just became expensive waste. So quick little side note, if you do have non-perishable food that's before its best by date and you don't want it anymore, you can donate it outside of the Vina Moses Center on Northwest Garfield near 9th Street in their new food pantry shelves. Another way to prevent waste with take what you can eat and then eat what you take is about portion control. The idea is if you serve smaller portions to begin with, people can always go back for seconds. And if they leave uneaten food on their plates, it means fewer plate scrapings and more usable leftovers available in the pot for subsequent meals or creative recipes. And many of you will have animals at home that eat your scraps. And that's also a great way to make sure your investment isn't wasted, because at least someone or something is benefiting from the expense. But we don't need to feed the worms our edible food. My friend Linda will talk about composting and worm composting in just a moment. One neat tool by the folks at SaveTheFood.com that we like is called the Guessmator. This enables you to figure out how much to cook for the number of guests you might be having over, or you can use it to figure out the number of leftover meals you want. And some people don't even like leftovers, so they can just plan ahead and try to cook for one. There's also recipe converters available online for that. Now, speaking of leftovers, getting creative with leftovers is another way to waste less food because it means trying something new, not just warming up the same meal again. It might mean trying new combinations of things like spaghetti pie, mac and leftover squash and cheese casserole, everything ramen, which, like it sounds, could pull together veggie stock made from a bag of previous kitchen trimmings, or a bone broth to get another meal out of that rotisserie chicken, and then just add leftover stir fry, fried rice, wilted but not slimy greens, those last couple carrots in the bag, etc. In our latest Kitchen Confessions blog, another great feature of our website, we share the results of our recent Recipes for Leftovers contest, which includes all of the recipes I've just shown you, the meals I've just shown you. And we especially blogged this last time about zero waste recipes that used up items most might not consider edible. And these include blending up some carrot top pesto, which I'm told is quite delicious. Maybe canning up some watermelon rind pickles, and even baking juice pulp muffins for a healthy and fibrous treat. There's also some great websites and apps to help you be creative out there. One of our favorites is bigoven.com. All you have to do is plug in up to 3 leftovers that you have on hand, or leftover ingredients like, let's say, rice, salsa, salmon. And then it will spit out some tried and true recipes that incorporate those 3 items. So getting creative also helps you decide how to store it though too, whether you're just gonna store it for a day, have it for tomorrow, or a week in the fridge, or maybe you wanna freeze it for an upcoming gathering or holiday. Whatever you do though, make sure you don't freeze it and forget it. We need to remember that if food gets freezer burned, it's wasted, right? It ends up being the same thing as throwing it away when it was fresh and still edible. When we properly store leftovers and other foods, they don't become science experiments when good food goes bad. One of our most popular smart strategies for preventing wasted food year-round is our Eat First sign. From our website, you can print and attach them to foods in the fridge, the freezer, or the pantry even, things that need to be eaten up sooner. We also encourage folks to use those Eat First signs on a special shelf or section in your refrigerator dedicated for leftovers and the most perishable items. In this last graphic here, this is a couple where there are some allergies in the family, so that they just kind of did their own thing and ran with it. Now in my house, this has really been a game changer for wasting less food. At meal prep time, we just visit that section first and create meals around what needs to go first. But don't let this happen to your fridge or freezer, because again, all that food becomes wasted. So I'd like to give you a fridge visibility pro tip. These are from my kitchen, one of my kitchen confessions, in fact, and a lesson learned. Here I thought I was doing so well when I started remembering to label my food with the container with the date. Well, when I put it in there, it wasn't old. So I didn't put it on my Eat First shelf, and then it got buried. And then several weeks later, I didn't even recognize the content. Those are beets that got moldy. My lesson was to put it on the Eat First shelf, label the front instead, like the picture on the right, and list the contents. Makes it much easier to build a meal at a glance. All right, and let's see, one of our other smart strategies is the freezer inventory form so that you don't freeze it and forget it. It's super easy to use, but it does require maintenance. So the way it works is, so you'll clear out your fridge, put in only in there what you're gonna keep in there, compost the rest, of course. This is if you're gonna start fresh. You can really jump in and use it anytime though. Anything you put in the freezer, you add it to the list with the date and the amounts. And then when you take something out, you just cross it off or adjust the amounts. This helps prevent overbuying if you shop your fridge, freezer, and pantry first before you go shopping. It also helps give you meal ideas. You might look in there and go, oh, hey, there's two, I don't know, pork chops or something, two veggie stir fries I forgot that I put in there. Let's have that tonight. And then sometimes it's really wonderful when you're really busy and didn't have time to cook anything. You realize you've got something already made. Saves you a bunch of money too. And all of these, again, are downloadable from our website. Now, this particular document that we call the Fruit and Veggie Storage Guide is a little odd of a shape. So it'd be better to pick one of those up from us at a farmer's market, and I'll talk about that in a moment. This Keep It Fresh guide offers you the best way to store fruits and vegetables, whether it's asparagus in a glass of water in the fridge, basil in water on the counter, not the fridge, or washing berries until it's time to eat them. These are important tips, and you can find them in our guide. Let's see, so the local Corvallis Southtown Farm Stand and Market is the one where we're tabling this year on most Tuesday evenings from 5 to 7 p.m. In this Keep It Fresh guide, there's also a small section about date labeling. That's your best by, sell by, use by dates. Now, it's a long-standing, there's a third myth here, that food expires. Food doesn't expire. It has a date after which it's not as good or isn't good. The only thing expiration dates really apply to in the food industry is baby formula. The industry standardized the terms best by and sell by and use by in 2018, but the old idea of expired food still persists. So we blogged about this in our blog called Check It Before You Chuck It. And so you can find out more information about that. I just dropped it in the chat for you all. Actually, it just went to Linda by mistake. 1 second here. All right, there you go. So in that blog, you'll learn, ask your nose. Ask your nose, does it pass the smell test? And then apply common sense and trustworthy guidelines like you can get at stilltasty.com. They offer an ultimate shelf life guide. And you can just type in the type of food and it'll tell you how long it can usually last in a fridge or maybe even a freezer. Comprehensive advice for how long it'll stay safe, searchable database. It's a great website. And while we don't spend much time talking about canning and preserving, it is also an excellent way to store foods for future use. And we cannot recommend enough the OSU Extension Service Master Food Preserver as a resource. All right, let's see. Now, we don't want to just be mindful about wasting less during the holidays when there's a lot more food, like July 4th, right? Thanksgiving, Christmas, it's any time of year. It's so easy to toss spoiled food in the compost and think that we're doing our part, when a lot of that food never had to go bad in the first place. Composting is still better than trashing it, but we don't have to waste it if we can prevent it. And since, remember, home is where the largest portion of food is wasted in the US, costing us $1,600 a year in an average American family of 4, let's just own that and look at our habits individually and as households, spot where we waste the most and reach for one of our project's smart strategies to fix it. And we can fix it. Try using this do-it-yourself wasted food discovery week form. You track what happens to your food for a week. You may very well be surprised. And I have a kitchen confession to share. I'm director of the program, and there's still food getting wasted sometimes at my house. You know, sometimes I'll forget to add something to the freezer inventory, or, oh my gosh, avocados. We're going to be blogging about avocados next because, boy howdy, I think that's the thing that goes bad the most easily and the most quickly in my home. So I'm going to learn about that. That's written by our outreach specialist, Karen Koss. She's our blogger. So yeah, I mean, the waste happens everywhere. It just takes time to adjust to new habits, get everyone on board, and make those small changes, and please celebrate those creative meals that used up the food instead of tossing it out. It saves you money, and a lot of times it's a lot of fun. So be sure to check out our Kitchen Confessions blog that I just mentioned. And that's where we publicly admit the wasted food that still happens at our house, acknowledge the money we wasted, and share the lessons we learned from it. It takes practice, but we all know it makes a huge difference, and no food left behind can help. So now what about that food that really is no longer edible and maybe never was? We do offer countertop compost collection pails. They're free, with stickers listing what our trash and recycling hauler will accept in them. They're made from 100% recycled plastic, manufactured in North America. Give you a little pro tip though, use a paper liner at the bottom. It makes cleanup a lot easier. When you go to dump it, you just turn it and it just plops right out. All right, and this is us when we were tabling at the downtown farmers market. And again, free collection pails at the Southtown Farm Stand and Market at the end of Southeast Alexander, most Tuesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. And here is how to reach us.
Excellent job. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Ashley.
And you're right on time.
Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you, Peter.
All right, with that, I think I don't see any questions in the chat, so folks may be saving their questions to the end. So maybe we'll move on to Linda's presentation, and then we'll save plenty of time for Q&A at the end.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Unmute myself, and I'm going to share my screen. Go back to the start from the beginning. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, that looks great.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm new to speaking at these TAP Talks, but I've attended them before in person pre-pandemic. And this talk that I've given on Zoom just to interested people because I get so many questions about how do I make compost work in my situation. So I'm going to try to go through this quickly. I'm going to touch on a lot of things. I'm going to just introduce some topics, and there's a lot on the internet that you can do to find out more about any of the things that I've talked about. And if anything that I say is not correct, then please contact me and let me know, and I'll update my information. All right, so I'm going to pop this in the chat because I'm not going to actually take you to a website with a video. That a little bit complex. If Earth were an apple. So I'm all about soil. Gardening for so many years, I just kind of kept, first I ate food, then I grew food, and now I make compost. That seems to be the start of every garden, is nutrients, good soil. If you add really good compost to your soil, I just heard this, some podcast, it was like, after 3 years of adding compost to your soil, you shouldn't have to add any type of fertilizer at all, whether you're using organic or regular fertilizer. So plants need nutrients just like our bodies do. Nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus are the main macronutrients, but then there's all those other micronutrients. Keeping those bioavailable to the plants is very important. If we bury them in landfills, the plants can't get at them very easily. And the rate of soil building in nature is slow. So if you really want good soil in your yard or in your garden, or you just want to contribute to the ongoing nature of plants, then composting is great. And soil is a living thing. It is mostly microorganisms. It also usually has some moisture, air, Air is a very important component of soil. And then rock, various types of rock. And it's fascinating that it's really hard to find really good compost, and it's very expensive, but you can do it yourself. And so, yeah, I'm going to talk just a little bit nerdy science about what is in your soil, because people complain to me all the time. They go, "Oh, I have clay soil." I'm like, thank goodness you have clay soil, because unlike sand and silt, clay holds this wonderful amount of water and nutrients, and it holds the cations, which are the nutrients, right? So it does need organic matter. So adding organic matter, and that comes down to composting, right? So your basic composting is browns and greens and air and water, right? There was a question that was, how do you keep your compost cooking when it's dry? Well, you take the hose and add water, or you take a sprinkler, a watering can, and you sprinkle it, right? But because if you just have a covered compost and you have no moisture in there, it'll desiccate, but it won't biodegrade very quickly at all. It'll become mummified. And so the other thing is, don't add pH changers like lime or ash until the compost is fully completed. Compost needs to be slightly acidic to do its job. Leaves and coffee grounds is a wonderful, simple compost that does not attract flies or other pests. In fact, if you really want to compost and you really don't want to have rats and other things raiding your compost, a simple compost of leaves and coffee grounds works best. I know that's not what everybody wants, but now I'm going to talk. There is so much to talk about with composting. The ideal ratio of brown to green is 25:1, but it's really an art, because depending on what your organic matter is, it will really change. So this foul smell that you get is something that means you didn't do it right. I'm sorry, but mainly compost should not smell bad if you're doing it really well. Okay, size matters. A lot of people just think they can just throw anything in there. They have half a watermelon that got rotten. Don't chop it up first. The surface of the material really matters. We also want air pockets. If you're doing traditional composting, you want air. And when you have no air, you get anaerobic decomposition, which smells. And then there's all kinds of layering schemes that I've read about in books, and I've tried a little bit myself, and I really like it. It's like when you put different layers, like I'll sometimes chop up little sticks when you trim branches, especially on deciduous trees. And as long as they're not black walnut, you can chop them up into 1-inch pieces and stick them in your compost, and they're really, really good. They have a lot of lignins, and they really add to the compost quality. So the other thing is, don't try to compost your weed seeds, because if you pull a bunch of weedy plants out of your garden and you throw them in your cold compost, you're going to get really bad weeds the next year. So a commercially produced industrial compost facility goes up to temperatures of 200 F. What we've got up north near the landfill, this is a very state-of-the-art composting. When I say up north, I mean north of Corvallis, right? So if you're within the Corvallis city limits, or you're just out of the city limits, you can get a yard waste card, and you can put your compostable things in there, and they'll truck it up there to the state-of-the-art composting facility, and they'll make it into compost. And the other thing is, we have a great private company. If you want to spend money, you can go to Earthfort, and there's also OSU. I think on another slide I have the OSU Extension will also test your soil for you. So then this is my main trick. When somebody tells me I have a messy, stinky compost pile, I did everything wrong, then I can rehabilitate it with agricultural grade gypsum. It's cheap if you buy it through the soil amendment sale. But don't use gypsum from housing projects. Don't use sheetrock. Don't pound up sheetrock because it has glue in it. It's not a good idea. So you'll also want to have some dry brown leaves, and you just do this layering where you put some of the glop, some of the brown leaves, sprinkle some gypsum, and make sure that you don't get excess moisture on that pile. So then another question that came up before this talk was, how do I keep rats and skunks and stuff out of the compost? Well, the only way I've ever found to really keep them out is a sealed system, because those little buggers will bite through anything unless it's like, metal mesh, thick metal mesh. Who wants to put all of the effort and time into doing that? You can also not put things in the compost that they're going to be after, right? So I'm going to give you a little bit more worm composting. So it's a special worm, Acinia fetida. They work the compost so you don't have to turn it. It's cold composting, so you don't want to put your weed seeds in there. You do have to have large enough bins or keep them inside during freezing cold. I actually had worm bins. The first time I did worms, I had them in big Rubbermaid totes, and I kept them outside. And when it got freezing cold, I'd bring them into my kitchen so they wouldn't freeze to death. But a lot of people don't want to do that. So if you get the recycling cart from Republic Services, it's not a cart, it's a bin. That volume, you can keep worms in that huge volume as long as you stuff it full of leaves in the fall. Those worms will stay warm. They'll go to the center of the bin in the coldest weather and huddle together. Also, the compost will give off some heat. So, and if you really wanted to keep them tidy, you could have an old blanket, put it over your compost bin if it was really cold. But worms don't particularly like meat, cheese, bread, orange rinds, brassicas. That's like coal crops like broccoli and stuff. They don't like eggshells and they don't like bones. So I'm going to show you another method for all those types of things. Size matters for all compost, but it's very important when feeding worms. And you can find all kinds of images about worm composting, so I didn't put them on here. This is what I do. I live in a 900 square foot condominium. I don't really have my own yard. I just have a little bit of space outside the back of my unit. And this is great because I do it on my back porch in these buckets. I first got a book by Adam Footer called Bokashi Composting. And this is a very different sort of thing. It's a fermentation, actually. And it's really smelling like beer. I'm sorry, but I kind of like beer. In fact, it's really a fermentation process. And you can feed it everything that the worms don't. So it's a very good complementary composting method for if you're already doing worm composting. The first time I did my own buckets. I got a bucket would sit inside of a bucket. I had my brother help me put holes in it so it would drip through, because you got to keep it not sopping wet, right? So you do have to buy the essential microorganisms, that's what EM is, or a Bokashi brand periodically, because the culture is super important. And the other thing is, you don't put this on top of the soil like most compost, you bury it. And then one of the greatest things is that it prevents methane formation when the compost is processing, because it's a fermentation process. Okay, and I'm going to show you some pictures. This is my Bokashi bucket with, it's nearly full, and I've just added some more scraps. You can see orange peel in here and a few other things, mango seeds. And I've sprinkled the Bokashi bran on here. I don't know whether that's very clear. And this is the fermented Bokashi added to a pit. And I'm going to show you a couple more pictures of that. Here's my little dog. She's 11 pounds. She's a little small thing, like a miniature Jack Russell size. And I've dug this little pit, and there's my bokashi bucket. And I'm going to catch, these nice ones that I bought from Bokashi Cycle. They have a spigot that opens to get at the liquid exudate that comes off of this fermenting stuff. It's really great for your acid loving plants. And so, and this is how I dig the bed. And after I dug it, I thought, oh, I can put my little catch container down there. That'll help you see how deep you want to get it. It's about 1 foot. This is just like a plastic something that I found. And then the key is sealed on this date tag. So when you finish filling your bokashi bucket, you seal it off and put a tag on it and you start another one. And I kept this one for 2 months and it was really nicely fermented. And then I take this exudate, I fill a watering can and add this to it. And then I go around to the blueberries or the roses or the rhododendrons, and they love it. I've really been perking up the rhododendrons in the landscaping by adding this. Okay. So now I'm going to just kind of like, I could end the talk here, but I also want to talk to you about a few peripheral things like free soil testing at OSU via extension. If you're doing gardening, you might want to know a little bit about your soil, how much phosphorus is in there, how much, potassium you have, what the pH is. Also, I want to promote 10 Rivers Food Web. I'm no longer a board member, but they're a wonderful nonprofit organization, and they host the annual soil amendment sale. So you can buy soil amendments in bulk. It's online. And then I want to also talk about this biochar solution. This is an amazing thing, the biochar. It's a story about the Amazon and these terra preta soils. It just really turned me on. And I buy biochar from a sustainable producer of it that uses waste to make the biochar. And then you add it to your compost. And it helps with the soil having really great properties. It also actually moves your soil to alkaline, which is what we need around here. Okay, so then and one thing about how this biochar came about is the difference between temperate regions and tropical regions is that we are so lucky here. Up to 50% of soil is organic matter that's in some stage of decay. We're talking about aside from the microorganisms, when we're talking about all the stuff that isn't actually alive. This is ideal conditions for the water and nutrients to be held in the soil. All of our soils have varying amounts of sand, silt, and clay according to the location, but the soil in tropical regions is only 5% organic matter. That's why tropical soils are very poor and people have a hard time. But a long time ago, before colonization, all over in the Amazon basin, people were doing this. They were creating terra preta, black soil, through a process that we don't know how they did it, but we are guessing. And they did something like biochar because they're finding it. They for many years, people mined this in Brazil and sold it to gardeners. And then a soil scientist came and said, you know what? This isn't a naturally occurring soil. This is a human-made thing. So never underestimate the amount of impact you can have on the world by doing composting or similar activities. Okay. And then if you really want to get into composting, this is one of the easiest to read and helpful books that I've ever had in my possession. And the library has a copy too. So that's by Barbara Pleasant and Deborah Martin, The Complete Compost Gardening Guide. It shows all kinds of great tips. And that's it. I'm done with my talk. I'm going to stop sharing now. And good. I did. The time's all right.
Yeah, perfect. You're exactly perfect timing. Nice job. All right, so we have plenty of time for questions. If folks have questions, you can put them in the chat. We have a few questions that folks submitted prior via the Q&A. So I can start with some of those while folks take some time to type up their questions in the chat. So one of the questions we got ahead via the Google form that folks filled in. What was the word I was looking for? The Google Forms folks filled in were suggestions for home gardeners concerning preventing waste. So I know this always happens to me every summer. You know, I have like all this excess zucchini, and you know, it would fill up my freezer. Are there any suggestions from either of you about what to do when we have an overabundance of food from our home gardens?
Give it away. Yeah, aside from canning it, but it's like I kind of try to keep track of whoever in my life might want to have some stuff. And the other thing is, don't have them come to you, drop it off to them. First, make sure they want it. So no zucchini on the porch, ring the doorbell and run away. That is another method, but I don't recommend it. They might get wasted. But yeah, it's seriously. And the resource that Jeanette mentioned that's new at Vina Moses, the food drop off and pick up, that's great. The other thing that I've done is my meditation group took food before the pandemic. We took food to the bridges over the overhang, and we gave it to the people that were living under the bridges, and they appreciated it. And yeah, one of my friends even one of the guys she met, he said, I really want to grow a tomato. So we got him a tomato in a pot, and he took it to his tent. And so it's wonderful when you have an abundance. And I guess I always try, there's the preserving it, of course, and just give it away. Think about it as another way to connect with people, to show your love to them, right? Think about who might want some of this. It takes some time though. And I know with our busy lives, oh good, somebody put the big oven for leftover recipes in there. That's great.
Yeah, there was a request from some folks to put some of the links you all had in the chat, but you can also send them to me after if that's easier. And when I post the YouTube video, I can put all the links that you provided in the YouTube video description. So, you know, if as you know, you're taking turns answering questions, if you want to throw links in the chat, go for it, but don't stress about it. We can collect them after too and make sure everyone who attended gets them. Anything to add, Jeanette, about the excess food from our home gardens when we have an abundance of things?
Yeah, well, a meme comes to mind. It says, teach a person to grow tomatoes and the whole community has tomatoes. It's definitely true. I have a lot of tomatoes this year, but that's on purpose. I'm helping feed 2 families with that. Planting an extra row is something that you can do. I know you're trying to say what to do with extra foods. We have this neat thing in Corvallis, and there's other places in the United States that are doing this, called little libraries. And some of the little libraries I've been seeing that are popping up are also putting in an area for extra produce. Right now, some of them people are actually putting like extra plants that they had, if they had extra cucumber plants or what have you, at planting time, they've been putting them in their little libraries. You know, people are kind of devising a new thing at the bottom for putting in produce afterwards later in the season as well. So that's kind of fun. Let's see, someone mentioned avocados. What I was going to say about storing or composting. Well, we're going to be doing our new blog about that. And so our upcoming blog will address what to do. I will say, if properly frozen, you can chop up and freeze, usually like a kind of a flash freeze, as quickly as you can on a cookie sheet in the freezer, chopped up pieces of avocado. And then once it's frozen, similar to lots of other foods, then you take it and bag it. Like you wouldn't just chop it up and throw it in a bag. You'd have one big lump of whatever it is that you did. But that's one way to keep your avocados. Link to the blog. Yes, I will get that over to you. I'll let you answer or ask the next question.
All right. I think you touched on this a little bit, Linda, but we had multiple questions about this come in with the Google form about how to keep pests, dogs, cats, skunks, rats out of your compost. And so any tips or tricks for those of us who have, neighborhood cats or rats that like to visit our properties?
You do have to have a strong metal screen, or if you use the compost bins that come from, you can either get a yard waste bin for free to use or a compost bin from Republic Services. I think they still have that program in effect because they want you to do this. It decreases the solid waste. So if you get one of those objects, those are cat, dog proof. The newer ones, there is one old one that my little dog was, the slats were too big and she would get in and eat compost, which is not good for their health, actually. She would get sick to her stomach from eating compost, but she couldn't stop because it was just so delicious. It smelled so good to her. So that is a danger, is to have your compost in a container of some sort, especially if you're in town. There are rats here. So you'd have to have not only a container, if it's free to the bottom, then they're going to dig right underneath it. They're going to tunnel in. So I've heard of people using strong wire mesh with really fine holes, right? So that small enough so that rats can't get through, and put that on the bottom, and then it has to be rounded up. It makes it quite the thing. It's a competition between humans and rats. As to who's going to win, I don't know.
Just as a aside, we have the Republic Services like yard waste, and we were having rat issues, and we bungeed the top down, and that helped keep the rats from getting into there. So they couldn't get in through the bottom, but they were smart enough to get in through the top. And so some bungee cords on the top of your bin can help if you're going that approach. Yeah.
Good.
Any thoughts on that, Jeanette? I'm not sure if you've had any pest issues with your
I have a cat.
waste.
No, I used to have a worm bin, and it attracted vermin. And as anyone who's paying attention outdoors in Corvallis knows, and a lot of the Northwest, and probably a lot of the United States, it's been a banner couple years for rodents. And so, yeah, composting in the backyard is a lot more difficult without attracting vermin. Having a cat has been helpful, but I do personally put my organic materials into the yard waste cart. And by the way, any of you who might be listening from Albany, exciting news. Corvallis and Philomath were the only local folks who could put food waste in their yard debris cart. But starting in September, Albany is going to be allowing you to do that. So that's exciting. I know. I probably
Love
wasn't supposed to
that.
announce it. Well,
Preview of coming attractions.
Yeah, it's exciting news, because when we were tabling, we'd get people from all over the place, and we're like, okay, well, what town are you living in? And so now we don't have to, now it's just this whole little area. I mean, if you're doing the best job you can in your kitchen with preventing food waste, you won't have nearly as much organic material to have to contend with. But certainly getting a free compost pail from us, or whatever kind of container, like Linda was saying, something nicely sealed, to help you remove that ick factor and that barrier of how do I get this to the curb, just small containers and take it out. I'm doing that, by the way, with coffee grounds. I keep them in their own separate container, because rather than sending them to the yard cart, I'm actually applying them to my roadies, and like Linda was mentioning, the other acid lovers. I mentioned azaleas in the chat as well, because that is a resource. That's food. It does still have some nutrients in there, and it also helps create additional soil.
Great.
Any other questions from folks in the chat?
We had a couple of questions. from before that someone had submitted. What is the best and cheapest way to dispose of food waste in a small apartment? I don't need compost, but I want food scraps. I don't want food scraps going to the dump where the nutrients aren't properly recycled into the soil. I knew we would get this question because we always get this question because it's relevant. This area does not have a compost drop site yet. I'm working on it. We're working on it. It doesn't take much, but I don't want to say too much about it, but it is something that's being brought to the right audience about maybe, being able to add that in the future, whether that be an extra few carts at Republic Services and, strategic places in town. So you're not driving all the way, a petroleum vehicle potentially all the way across town just so that you can compost your food scraps. So either that or maybe in cooperation with a local event where people every week can bring their items. It's at square one right now of even just beginning to talk about it, but we hear you. We know it's an issue. What we normally tell people is if you have a friend with a yard cart, a neighbor with a yard cart, ask permission, and if you get it, use their carts because it is worth it. Please be sure not to put any compostable plastics. Unfortunately, in our compost facility here, those do not break down. I should remember whether or not the paper, the plastic, the biocompostable plastic bags are allowed, but I believe they are not because most of them are not BPI certified, which is a very special type of compostable plastic. So just tune in. I'll get you guys some information about that. I believe it's a no. So that's why our compost pail, putting paper in the bottom, you don't need a bag that you pull out and toss out. You put the brown, I like to use like a brown paper bag with some newspaper and I just press it into the bottom, add your food scraps as usual. And then when you dump it, the odor and the moisture is being absorbed by the paper. And so it really doesn't get stinky. I will tell you though, I keep onion and garlic out of there because that's guaranteed to make it super stinky before you want to take it out. And then when you go to dump it, the paper just comes with it and barely a rinse out is needed. They're great pails. Hey, Linda.
Onion and garlic. So for those of you that save food scraps for broth, you can put all the onion skins and all the garlic skins, all the choppings from onions and garlic can go right into your broth. Or I always have a plastic container that I add all my shiitake mushroom stems and my chopped up any alliums, garlic, onions, and shallots, put those all into the same container and pop it in the freezer because I might not have time to make broth when I'm making dinner. Sometimes I do anyway. I just, have a pot of broth. If you're going to chop up a lot of vegetables, it might be good to have a pot of broth going and then freeze that so you don't forget it. I don't know how many times I've made broth, stuck it in the refrigerator and then forgot or got distracted or suddenly went to go eat someplace else. Somebody offered me a meal and I'm like, yeah, I'll go eat with you. And then I'm like, oh, but I was going to use the broth. And now the broth is a week old and it's like, yeah, maybe not. And if you don't add salt to it, you could put it onto a plant. If you have broth just veggie broth with no salt, just think to yourself, did I put salt in it or not? If you put salt, don't put it on your plants or highly dilute it because so that's a good reason not to add salt to your broth until the last minute.
Great tip. I never thought about that. We had a question ahead of time in the form, and again, some of these things were addressed, but someone had a question of what are some simple, easy things I can do to get started in reducing my food waste at home, but also at work? So we talked a lot about what people can do in their own kitchens, but what about work?
Yeah, actually at work, I do my other job for the Sustainability Coalition is working with businesses to help them be more sustainable. And inevitably, almost every place has their own fridge and it's got science experiments in it. And what I like to tell people is take a permanent marker and some tape and have them available. Maybe even tie, the Sharpie to the fridge, and encourage all your employees in your case, or whoever's case, if it's employees or coworkers, to label the food that you put in there, just like I did, where you, in this case, it'd be with your name, but put it on the front, put the name, the date that it went in, and then you know how long that's been in there. And if you go to open up the fridge, you know which one's yours. There's no questions. There's no fridge clean outs. That, as a matter of fact, I want to tell you guys, ever since I started this program and had to really walk my talk, I don't have to do fridge clean outs anymore. It's the best thing ever, because now I find stuff. Sure, there's a few things that occasionally get through, but I don't have to do a full-on fridge clean out because stuff got buried, behind this, behind that, because I've labeled it and because I've done a better job being on top of it and staying and maintaining it. So the same would be at work, just stay on top of it. You can take your banana peel or what have you at your desk, put it in your little Nancy's yogurt container and bring that home, or just have it at your desk all week and take it home on Friday. That could work too. Somebody asked about coffee grounds directly on the roadie. The coffee grounds, you can do the same thing at work as well. But if you can, usually at a workplace, it takes one champion. If you can get everybody else to participate, but there's one person who sort of cheerleads and takes care of the container, like you could get everybody to put the coffee grounds all week, for example, in a container. And if somebody, probably you, at the end of the week are that champion that then takes it home, washes out the container, and then brings it back on Monday.
I have a story.
Go ahead, Linda.
So I was working at Hewlett Packard until 2012, and then I took one of their packages, and we had a really strong sustainability network, and they were taking at all the coffee, all the works, the break stations, the lunchrooms, they put the coffee grounds into, and all the food waste into a separate container, and that was all shunted off to a separate waste stream. When I returned as a contractor in 2017, they had dropped that. Somebody, suppliers changed that. So what happened was, I was like, I can't let all these coffee grounds go to waste. I know they're not organic coffee, but they still can't let them. So I started bringing in a little bucket, and I set it on the counter next to the coffee maker, and it says compost grounds in here. I didn't ask anybody to do it. I just did it. I ask forgiveness later if somebody has a problem with it. And I started training people. I'm like, yeah, you take this giant thing of coffee grounds, you open this little, I made it as easy as possible, plop it in there. And I'm like, and that way the trash isn't all wet mess. And the people, the janitorial service, they loved it, because there's nothing worse than a heavy wet bag breaking and putting coffee grounds all over the floor. So eventually one of the managers of the janitorial service in the company, I think I shamed them into doing it again, because by the time before the pandemic hit, they had announced that they were reinstating the food waste pickup and source separation at the break rooms. So really what you say about one champion, one person, that's what it pivots on. One person to do it, to model it, to insist that this is the right thing to do. And then you'll have a whole chorus of people saying, I'm so glad you did that. Yeah. This makes all the difference in the world. I feel so much better, right? So make HP earn its sustainability badge, right? Yeah, they really like to tout that in their corporate stewardship reports. But in between years when they're audited, then you can't let them slip up. Just remind them kindly.
Maintenance.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, keeping up on the systems, and give yourself some slack. I mean, like if you mess up, if you've got a system going and then it kind of falls by the wayside, just pick it right back up and do it again. It really does take practice. Just like yoga, just like learning a new language, you do it and then you do it again and you do it again. Baby steps, but forward steps for sure. I wanted to mention coffee grounds. There's a lot of coffee makers where you don't actually have to have the filter. You can buy a reusable filter. So from just a general waste prevention perspective, I'd like to encourage that in any kind of workplace or home environment, that you can do that. As much as you can, get rid of those Keurigs. Or if people are really attached to their little Keurigs, single cup servings, they make reusable little Keurig doodads now, where you can take the bulk coffee, put it in, stick it in, and have your cup. Had to plug that.
Great. Well, we're right at 8 o'clock. Does anyone have any questions that they're, hoping to get answered?
I just want to say
Go ahead,
thank you
Linda.
to everyone that attended. Thank you for keeping the momentum going. We have a great community here. Jeanette is amazing. The other women that I just met that run this program, amazing. Just, it's like, may this energy just explode out into the world and cast wonderful visions amongst other people in other places so that everybody can do all of this stuff.
Yeah,
Thank you. That's really kind. Oh, go ahead, Jeanette.
Thank you. Well, I concur, and I'm really grateful that you allowed us to come and speak to you tonight. I did put the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition's website in the chat, and I also want to thank Julie Jackson with Republic Services, who was present on the Tap Talk tonight, and let us know that in fact compostable bags, all compostable bags, along with the compostable products, theoretically they're compostable. They're not allowed in the yard debris / mixed organics cart in Corvallis.
That's right.
And
That's right. Darn it.
Great.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we can do without them. We have reusable containers, right? Just be creative.
Right.
Very true.
And eventually they'll figure it out. We need the next generation in compostable containers. Design engineers heads up. Design intent must be, they must work with the systems we have in place now.
Yep. And not planned obsolescence either.
Very
That's
good
a whole
point.
different Tap Talk.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for the wonderful presentations this evening. This would be the point where we all give you a round of applause, which is, awkward on Zoom. We can do it or use the little emoji.
Zoom applause.
Yes. This is incredibly insightful, and I hope that folks will join us for our July Tap Talk, where I believe Linda has volunteered to come back and to give a additional conversation around composting. And so we'll be continuing this conversation into July. We will take August off for Tap Talks to give folks a break from Zoom, and then hopefully we'll be back in the fall as well, maybe in person. So we're looking forward to see you all in July. If you have any questions about Tap Talks or 500 Women Scientists, please feel free to reach out, or any questions for Jeanette or Linda. There's lots of great links and information to gain there. So I hope everyone has a really great evening, and thank you all, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.